Okay, so that was what I expected to happen. I love looking at food blogs and people who spend all their time blogging about healthy recipes and stuff and such. And so I had this idea that that is what it was going to turn out like. All Tumblr, looking all beautiful with great quality photographs. Yeah, well, needless to say, that didn't happen. Okay, so what happened? The three main things that hindered my progress was the procrastination. I'm not normally a person that procrastinates because I normally have a fixed deadline. There's normally something as an end goal that has to be accomplished. But when the goal you have to set for yourself, it became a lot more difficult for me to motivate myself to actually do it because there were no marks for this. This wasn't going to impact my future. In a year's time, if I failed, nobody would know. So why should I actually bother doing this was my thought process. The second thing is I realized afterwards that perhaps this wasn't the best project for me. When I started it, it was something that I was really passionate about, and I still am. But I think that maybe it isn't something that I should have enjoyed enough to spend a whole year working just on it. I mean, reading food blogs every once in a while and making a whole project of trying to create your own is two very different things. And then what happened is I also learned a lot about myself and how I go about completing things. I learned that although I like to think I'm normally quite a productive person, that's only because somebody else is setting a goal for me. And that maybe in the future I need to work on motivating myself and being more productive when I have to set my own goals, which is going to be the case a lot of the time in the future. So if I could do it differently, I would spend more time choosing a project that I could really spend time on. Because I felt like because I was so worried about starting and getting it going, although I did spend a lot of time thinking, if I'd spent more, maybe I would have enjoyed the experience more. The second thing is I would have planned it better. I, like I said, procrastinated a lot and then left a lot of the work for the holidays, which was fine. But when the holidays came, I wanted to go out and do things which I couldn't normally do during the term, and then the project kind of got pushed away to the sidelines. And then the third thing I always do differently is not get despondent. So the thing is, when you don't do a lot of work, you feel like you're not accomplishing anything, and then you don't want to do any work because you feel like you're not going to accomplish anything. So something that I've taken away from this is, so you had a bad day, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, you didn't complete absolutely anything, that's fine. Tomorrow's a new day, wake up and get into it, because the sooner you get into it, the sooner you're going to realize, A, that you actually enjoy it, or B, that you actually don't, and then you've got more time to change the project. That's me.
And then I underestimated how hard it was to create music because a lot goes into it, because you have to have the rhythm and it has to sound nice, and so you can't just like make a random sound because it doesn't always work out well. So like everyone else said, like we achieved something, but like we didn't achieve our vision goal. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. In the beginning I didn't really want to do it, but when I got the app and I started making the music, it was like fun, and I just kept wanting to do it more.
And one of the most valuable things that I learned was that sometimes you just have to do it, because it's very easy to procrastinate to no end. So I think my biggest struggle was actually like finding time to do what we needed to do, and then as well as having the right equipment to do the project efficiently.
Okay, so I struggled with actually creating the figure that we were going to use, because I originally had this amazing idea that I was going to draw a whole scene and everything with all these amazing figures. Anyway, it didn't happen because it's just really difficult to create your own characters. And then also the second thing that I found really, really frustrating was that iMovie didn't allow me to make the frames short enough. So it's so irritating to see it all like moving really slowly across the page when it could be like bouncing.
So I decided to present you guys today a journey that I took in order to realize a very important lesson, and that is to be okay with failure. Instead of seeing it as not accomplishing something, but more as a lesson to learn from, and see it as an opportunity to learn from my mistakes. I've learned that I need to get things done when I am motivated, because if that motivation is gone, well, good luck finding that. So
I learned that I enjoy blogging and that sort of style of writing, and that's really important in my academic field.
So overall, I think most of the learning for me came from blogging and writing blogs and reflecting, and even now reflecting on my reflections, I think that I can see how I've grown and how I've like developed a love for writing more. And I think even writing now for like, as Alia said, for test days when we do exam days, that it's more easier for me to write.
I think for me, like something that I learned was being practical, and like having each other, like motivating, inspiring each other was like really important. So I think
So I wanted to do this video so that I had a record of online of the thinking that I had when I put together the 20% time project I did with my grade 10s last year. So at the beginning of the year, I just had this feeling that I wanted my class to be exposed to more than just sort of a traditional classroom. I wanted them to have a chance to develop some of the skills that we know are going to be important in the 21st century and in schools, now. And so these were things like creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, self-directed learning, and communication, these types of things. And so I wanted my class to experience that, but I didn't know how they would get that if we followed a traditional pattern. So I read this book called 20 Time in January, and after reading it I was like, I've got to do this, I've got to give it a shot. Even if I don't know exactly what I'm doing, I'll read diligently and I will figure out enough that I can make it happen. And so that was the thinking behind 20% time with my grade 10s. The intention was getting them to reflect, getting them to think critically, and to have a chance to do something very much more self-directed, as opposed to being told what to do, and learning the value of failure, these types of things. So I set out with that basic planning. I knew from my readings that I had to have a sort of a task at the end, some sort of accountability, and so we had this year-end presentation, and that was great. So from day one we knew kind of what the goal was. There was this presentation and we were accountable for that, and then we just tried to structure the journey as best we could along the way. In terms of looking at the progress over the year, I think we were all pretty excited at the beginning to do something different. And there was good energy, and the website for 20 Time had some great instructional stuff, and I kind of adapted it for our context, and there was good engagement. I would say though, by the beginning of the second term, we were starting to realize how difficult it is to be self-directed, especially if you're so used to being told what to do. And so some of the groups were able to find topics that they felt connected to, and you could see their engagement go up, whereas other groups kind of they struggled through that patch trying to find something that they could feel enthusiastic about, something that they could do work with. And it was interesting to watch that and how, we underestimate how hard it is to find a topic that you feel connected to and to start learning, about it. And it shouldn't be because, if you're naturally curious, it's a natural thing for us to do, to learn. But somehow it's got to the point where it's quite hard to focus on something that you choose because you're kind of used to being told what to do. And so, the second term was still good, but you could definitely see how the groups that could find a topic and go with it started to kind of pull away, whereas the groups that were still trying to figure something out, it wasn't a problem, but you could just feel that that difference would grow over time. And so that was kind of the second term. And then as we got to the third term, I think the reality of the situation kicked in. And again, those groups that were able to find something that it wasn't too big, it wasn't too small, it was just right for the allocated time, it used some of the skills they had, but also pushed them to develop new ones, those groups seemed to find a pathway to navigate it, whereas the groups that, or the individuals that felt still unsure about what they were going to do or were struggling to balance the time commitment or just weren't used to this type of work, they felt a bit stressed over that time. I just did my best to coach them, to try and focus them on, what are the primary goals of this thing. And in fact, the primary goals were just, learning how to reflect, learning how to adapt as you learn new things, and that the sort of slightly stressful process that they were finding was part of the learning. It was part of the journey that they had to go on, and you would learn skills if you went through that. And so that was a really interesting experience to watch, and I definitely think there's a lot of value in going through that. Even if you feel like you're getting lost, that realization that to figure out what you're interested in, to figure out what's on the edge of your comfort zone, what's the zone of proximal development, where is that for you and how do you push forward with that? And how do you take that autonomy and use it? I think that for a lot of learners, because they haven't experienced it before, they need time to almost get used to it, and this project gave them that. And my hope is that in future that they will kind of learn the lessons from this that will allow them to work independently much more effectively in future. On the actual presentation day, I was genuinely surprised by some of the groups. They made incredible quality, like they really achieved things with their time, and I kind of had almost lost track of them, and so it was really a good feeling to see that. And there was a broad range of groups. I think there were some outstanding projects. There were also some projects where there was definitely significant growth, and I think that whilst the learners probably got a bit lost along the way, there was so much benefit to them being exposed to that uncertainty and learning how to scaffold it. And even for the learners who struggled to relate to this project, and there were a couple who just they were present for whatever reasons they couldn't get into it, I still think that being exposed to blogging, being exposed to scaffolding your own learning will pay dividends for them. And I don't think it was a waste of their time. I mean, I'd be interested to hear from them what they think. And I've got some surveys that I will include in this video later on, which show kind of the general feedback of the class. But I really didn't feel like, even for the people who were least engaged with the project, I felt like they learned things. There was a broad group in the middle who, you could definitely see they learned a significant amount, and there were some outstanding projects where, it really was to think if they hadn't had that opportunity, it would have been sad if they hadn't had a chance to do that. And I kind of wonder, why schools can't take one day a week and say, like, can't we investigate this type of learning? And also even look at, do the marks adapt? Do they not? It may be that we can be more efficient with our 4 days, and then this could be reserved for, this sort of more free, self-directed learning. And I really think it's worthy of further projects, further discoveries, further study, because learners do pick up a lot of skills in this process. And I could definitely notice, things like collaboration. A lot of groups were collaborating in a way that I don't think they would have before. Their creativity on show was great. The critical thinking, the problem solving that I saw in those presentations, I'm not sure if the learners were even aware of it, but you could see how they hit an object, a problem, and then they'd found out, they'd reached out, they'd spoken to a mentor, they had spoken to a friend, they had kept trying until they found a way to fix it. And, you know, problem solving, critical thinking are really important skills, and I really felt like I saw evidence of that in the class in front of me. I also felt like the idea of failure, like I felt like that we got to normalize failure, that the class that I did this with were a very driven bunch, and you know, they excelled academically, but it was nice for them to have an opportunity to be exposed to something where the rules aren't, you know, sort of algorithmic or too algorithmic, and have a chance to kind of feel vulnerable but also feel safe and try something new. And I think that will be a benefit to them, hopefully, for a long period of time. One of the conscious decisions I made at the beginning of the year was, even though it was a maths class, I thought that, you know, to ensure maximal engagement, I would allow the learners complete flexibility. And I think that that is an appropriate place to start in your first year. I think that if you try to mandate too much what's going on, then you're going to lose that engagement. And this, you know, especially for the first type of project like this, there's a lot of uncertainty, and you don't want to become too rules-based. I think you want to give structure, but you don't want to be overbearing. And so looking back, I think that that choice to allow freedom was a good one. I don't think that I would change that in any way. But if I did this again, maybe in grade 11 with this group, I think I probably would have, you know, then try to focus in on a narrow scope for things, and probably, you know, would have allowed it to be a sort of more maths focused thing. And one of the justifications that I would use for this type of project is that as a mathematician, things like critical thinking and problem solving, things like collaborating, things like being creative are, you know, subject outcomes just as much as learning how to factorize is. And so even though the content wasn't directly mathematical in this thing that we did, the learners were having a chance to develop these skills that are directly applicable to being a good mathematician and a good mathematical education. And so, you know, when we look at things like the CAPS documents and we look at things like that, I really do think that we can justify using, you know, one lesson a week for this type of thing. Some of my other observations would be that it's pretty important, the groups that seem to do the best at this, and remember this, you know, this was kind of a group that hadn't experienced this directly before. Some of them had experienced a sort of a project-based learning week in grade 8, but generally they didn't have much experience with sort of completely self-directed learning. The thing that really seemed to work was if you could settle into choosing a topic in the first term, that seemed to set you up quite well. And that doesn't really help you that much, because choosing a topic is a difficult thing. And so, you know, the question that then follows is, how do you choose a good topic? But from what I could see, the learners who chose their topic, they chose something which was on the edge of their comfort zone. So they might have had a bit of pre-existing skill or some contact that they had when they started, and then they seemed to climb or use that as leverage to kind of help them throughout the year. Whereas the learners who maybe went, you know, way outside, you know, too far outside their comfort zone, they just couldn't bridge that gap, and so they couldn't then climb over the year. So choosing a realistic topic, choosing a topic that you're genuinely interested in was really important. It takes quite a lot of effort, and I think the learners discovered that, to do something good, really good. And so if you choose something that you only sort of roughly care about, or you care about just a little bit, you're going to run out of steam halfway through the year. So choosing a topic that you are connected to, and you know, you feel like, oh, it's worth doing this regardless of what's happening, I would say that that's an important thing that was proved, you know, in our experience. I think that one of the things that I tried to engineer as much as I possibly could was feedback to the learners, but the first time you do this, it's quite hard to create the appropriate structures for feedback. So, you know, we had the blog writing part, so we would, learners were required to write blog posts as often as was reasonable, and I try to give comments, and some other teachers try to give comments. I think that we were trying to do a lot in the first time that we did this, and so that was quite, you know, it was quite hard to get enough feedback for the whole project from just the blogging. We did have kind of individual meetings, but for the most part, I definitely think that if I did this again, I would try and get the feedback to be better. I would also try to create more opportunities for peer feedback. Whilst I knew that peer feedback was important, it just seemed like with the time that we had, it just kind of ran away, and I didn't have a chance to get the learners to kind of almost look at what they were doing. I mean, some of the issues with that were related to learners almost still trying to get stuff together. But I know from my previous experiences with project-based learning, peer feedback is really, really important, and it can really help. And so I think trying to create structures for peer feedback is important in this process. When we started, there's definitely a settling in period with this type of thing. You find that the learners are kind of open to the idea once you've kind of explained the rationale behind it, but then it really is strange when you're given that time and now you have to make it happen. And so I think that when you start, it's really good to have some structure in place. We tried things like the Bad Idea Factory. We watched video clips of other 20% time learners. We try to just kind of give it a context, and from my readings, one of the things that's emphasized is this idea that you want to show examples of excellence. And so we try to watch excellence, or examples of excellence in terms of other 20% time projects, and then try to work backwards and say, like, what things are those projects exhibiting? And so that was a really good way to start this off and to almost allow the transition to then trying to define a project. And that also takes time and reflection and comment. But those are really important things, the sort of settling in period. And then once people are getting used to this workflow, okay, how do you choose a topic? And I think that needs a lot of reflection, a lot of feedback, and it also needs energy from the student. And then once those two blocks are in play, then the students kind of get up to speed. And I think that you really do, if you're doing this as a year project, I think you would be a lot more likely to have success if you can get the settling in and the deciding of a topic by the end of term one. And then it leaves you 3/4 of the year to go through the inevitable ups and downs that come with this type of learning, and then sort of the last term to kind of gather together for your final presentation and reflections and things like that. So in closing and looking back on the 20% time project, I definitely think it was worth it. I think that we still need to figure out ways of using this type of methodology, and I think it's very much a small percentage of teachers who are trying it, but it's well worth the risks. If you look at the rewards versus the risks, it really seems out of touch, and my thinking is that we should definitely give this sort of thing a go and then share our findings. I think that we need to be okay with if things go a bit pear-shaped or some projects don't go well. We need to be okay with asking ourselves, well, why did that happen? And then allowing sort of the critical thinking muscle to be used, and realizing that that is education. Sometimes things don't work out. The education part is in the reflection and understanding, well, what happened? Why did that happen? And this type of concept and workflow really does allow that to come out more so than the sort of more predictable, in my subject, do this, you got it wrong, you got it right, this is a method you should follow. It just has so many more layers to it, and there's a richness to it that doesn't seem to come across in the conventional classroom methods.